Thank you very much, Jodie, and welcome everyone to this morning's presentation on positive behaviour strategies in the classroom. You're very welcome to drop me questions as we go along. However, I won't be able to see the questions box at the moment, but Jodie will read them through a little bit later on. Just before we start properly, I will be asking you a little bit further in just to note down some of your thoughts. So if you could get perhaps a piece of paper and a pen or a pencil, or you might want to make notes in your phone, just so we can do that little exercise. So if you'd like to do that now, that would be really, really helpful. Thank you. Okay, so the key themes that we're going to be looking at today, we're going to be thinking about dysregulation, what that actually means, how that might present, what that means for us as practitioners, but also for the child. We're going to look at how we can understand the needs in relation to what we're seeing, what we're hearing, what we're observing. We'll be looking at strategies for preventing possible outward behavioural responses and reactions. We're going to look at how we can navigate that recovery, and then we'll look at how we can develop that system of support. So they're the key themes that I'm going to talk about today. Okay, you'll all be very familiar, I'm guessing, with this concept of the iceberg. With an iceberg, you only see a little bit. That's on top of the water. There's a huge part of the iceberg that sits below. And when we're thinking about behaviour, that's exactly what it's like, isn't it? We see outward behavioural responses. So we might be able to see actions, we might be able to hear responses and words and noises and cries and that type of thing. What's causing that sits below that watermark there, doesn't it? So we have the what we see, and we have the why. Why is this happening? So the what, we might see physical responses, might we? So that might be lashing out or throwing things, being disruptive in our classrooms. It might be aggression towards self. It might be aggression towards teaching staff or peers in the classroom. We might see emotional responses like crying, whether that's outward, like big sobs, whether that's that sort of internal, just trying to hide that crying. We might see what some people might term as a meltdown, that, you know, utilizes all of the responses available to that child in that moment. We might see refusal. I'm not going to comply. I'm not going to do what I'm told. I'm going to sit here, or I'm going to run away, or whatever that might be. Refusal can look in lots of different ways, can't it? And sometimes that refusal is vocalized, and sometimes that refusal is a very, very quiet refusal, isn't it? And we might have the flight, running out of the classroom, running out of school. So these are just examples of what we might observe. Let's think about the why. So the why that I'm talking about here would be within the 5 domains of self-regulation as set by Dr. Stuart Sanker. So we have social. So is the child being bullied? Do they have a lack of friends? Are they bound to peer pressure? Are they feeling peer pressure, whether they're bowing to it or not? How do they interact with others? Do they interact with others? Are they seen as being social beings? Are they seen as being withdrawn? What else in the why? There's cognitive reasoning. So how is our child organising their thoughts? How are they making decisions? What are their decisions based on? What's their working memory like? Are they able to to hold things in their working memory whilst they're using them. So holding those instructions or ideas or thoughts or even emotions there. What about their longer term memory? What's happened for this child? What can they remember from whether it was yesterday in the classroom, last week in the classroom, last year in the classroom? Are they bored? Think about stimulation. Are they understimulated? Are they overstimulated? Is there too much for them to be able to manage? I've just mentioned emotions when I was talking about emotional memory there and cognitive, but think about, are emotions separate to that? Is that child experiencing any big emotions right now? Think about their family unit. Think about their pets. Are they perhaps experiencing grief or loss, anxiety or fear, embarrassment, loneliness, helplessness? Knowing about their family life, their friendships, might help us look into this a little bit more. Who are they close to? What do those bonds look like? We have the biological why. What about the temperature? Are our children responding because they're too hot, they're hot and bothered and they can't regulate? Are they cold and not able to focus and concentrate because they're cold? Are they hungry, thirsty, tired? Did they have a good night's sleep last night? Were they able to go to sleep? Were they safe enough to go to sleep? Did they wake up early this morning? What environmental aspects of it they had to perhaps put up with? Think about, do their clothes fit? Are their clothes warm enough? Are they able to perhaps engage in their environment? Have they got their glasses on? Have they got their hearing aids in? Are they physically present in the room? And then there's the pro-social zone, pro-social domain of regulation. And the pro-social domain looks at perhaps those wider concepts, the world. Okay, what's going on in the world right now? I'm sure lots of us have seen the news just recently. Some of us might be avoiding the news just recently. There's an awful lot going on in the world. Are our children in our classrooms perhaps absorbed in that media frenzy that's happening at the moment? Do they worry about what's going on in the world right now? Expectations of others comes into this part. So what do we expect of those children in our classrooms? What do they think we expect of them? Again, what do their parents expect? What does the child think their parents expect? How do they see their role in the classroom, in the school, in their family? Responsibility. We have lots of children, don't we, who may have caring responsibilities, whether that's for a parent who might be poorly, who might be alcohol dependent, who might be stressed, who might be experiencing grief and loss of their own. Lots of our children may feel that sense of responsibility towards their parents. They might feel that sense of responsibility towards their siblings. Do they have younger siblings that they have to look after and have to perhaps get ready for school of a morning even before they can come in? So what's their responsibilities? Within pro-social, looks at empathy and sympathy. Do the children in our classrooms have the ability to show empathy? Do they sympathise with their peers, with society, with what, again, coming back to the news, what we're seeing on the news? How does that sit with them? So with everything we're seeing underneath that watermark, we may well see any of the above. The physical response, the emotional response, the sense of needing to get away. So it's interesting that when we're seeing behaviour, That's an outward response to something that's happening internally, the why. Think about those domains that we've just spoken about there. We all carry those domains around for ourselves, don't we? We carry them around in, you know, a hypothetical backpack. So for the sake of our slides today, I'm calling it the stress backpack. Okay, what's my stress backpack? So what goes into our backpack is dependent on our experience. So in my backpack today, perhaps, I'm tired. I have a health condition that sometimes means it's difficult to sleep. Didn't have a very good sleep last night, so I'm tired. So that tiredness is in my backpack. I had a nightmare journey coming into work this morning because here the fog is so thick. So coming into work just dysregulated me anyway. Okay, that dysregulation's in my backpack. Right now, I'm sat in a small office while I'm delivering this. In the main office where my main desk is, I've got IT technicians at the moment swapping all my technology around. I don't know what that will look like when I go back in. I don't know. I'm a technophobe. I don't know whether I'll be able to work that equipment. That's in my backpack as well. So even just there, you've heard 3 things from me that I've put in my stress backpack today. And it's already full of the other things that I perhaps deal with in my day-to-day life. So as you can see there, I've got all that historic stuff in my backpack. I've got the stuff that's happened to me already this morning in my backpack. But throughout the day, as we encounter more challenge, as we encounter barriers, as we encounter other people's expectations, the work that we're doing, we put more in our backpack as the day goes on, doesn't it? So some backpacks start the day already jam-packed full. We've got care and responsibilities, if we've had to get our siblings ready for school as well as us and make sure that they've had their breakfast. Think about what's in that backpack already. Our genetic makeup impacts how we carry our backpack. Okay, so our genetic makeup, are we neurodivergent? It's our genetic backpack, isn't it? So if we're neurodivergent, there might be things in our backpack that they're not in our peers. What about how we deal with stress and worry? Think of that genetic factor as well, and how we carry that backpack. Our health conditions within our genetic makeup, that will impact. So for the majority of us, that backpack becomes heavier as the day goes on. And that means our window of tolerance might reduce as the day goes on. That might mean that the more that's in our backpack, the more you're seeing the what that was on the previous slide. So in our backpack, like we've just seen, there's all of the stuff that we're dealing with on a day-to-day basis. But there's also the stuff that we've dealt with in the past. What's in our memory? What happened last week in this scenario? What happened last year in this scenario? What's happened in my family in the past? What's happened in my school life in the past? All of this can build up that sense of stress, anxiety, worry as we go along. And with that build up, we're likely to see emotional or behavioural responses, outward emotional or behavioural responses. And that's what we typically call behaviour, isn't it? I'd asked you before whether you could get a piece of paper and a pen or pencil or whatever to write down some notes. So I'd just like to perhaps try and think about how we experience maybe stress or worry or problem solving. Because we're online today, I can't do anything physically with you, but I'm going to read you a short passage. Okay. As I'm reading the short passage, I'd like you to put yourself in that scenario, please. I'd like you to perhaps listen to what I'm saying and picture what I'm saying and put yourself there. As I'm talking through that, I'd like you just to note down how you're feeling as I'm talking, how you would be feeling if you were in that situation. Okay, it's only a short passage. I'm going to read it now. Okay, so I looked at the clock on my desk. It was 17 minutes past 8 p.m. I should have left work 2 hours previous, but a last-minute project meant that I had to be stuck until I finished that project. So it was late. I hastily packed my bag because I needed to get home. I put my phone in, put my keys in, packed that really, really fast, fumbling as I was going because I was in such a hurry. As I was doing that, I was thinking about what time my bus would be. The last bus was at 8:30. It was already 7 minutes past 8, and the bus stop, it was 10 minutes walk away from the office. As I'm trying to pack my bag and get my coat and lock up and remember, have I got everything here? My heart had started to race a little bit as I was trying to get out the office to get to that bus stop. Outside was really, really cold. Took my breath away the minute I walked out the door. It was cold, it was dark. I walked as quick as could towards the bus stop, but as I turned the corner, I saw my bus pulling away. My stomach absolutely sank. There wouldn't be another number 11 bus tonight. That was the last number 11 bus. So thinking about my options, I thought, okay, I'll phone a taxi. I got my phone out of my bag, but the screen was blank. My battery had run out. I couldn't phone a taxi. I looked around, all of the shops were closed. There was no one I could go and ask to phone me a taxi. So my only option would be to get the night bus. I knew the night bus went close to where I lived. It went to the next village, but there wouldn't be another one for 20 minutes. So I had to stand for 20 minutes. That was my only option. So I stood there at the bus stop in the dark and the quiet and the cold, pulling my coat tighter around me as I stood in the bus stop. It was dimly lit. All the shadows from the trees were all making shapes. Seemed like forever while I was waiting for that bus. When the bus arrived, I got onto the bus and I scanned around all of the empty seats. I thought I was the only person on that bus. As I was walking towards the middle of the bus to sit down, I noticed that there was somebody sat at the back. The hood up, and he was slumped over, so I couldn't tell who they were, couldn't tell whether they were male or female, young or old. They were sat slumped at the back of the bus. I sat down, and although I tried to ignore that person at the back, I kept glancing over. The bus rumbled to life and we started moving forward. Silly lights flickering as old buses around my area do. Outside, it started to rain really heavy. Looking out the windows through the dark and the blackness and the heavy rain, I couldn't see anything outside. I didn't actually know whereabouts I was. I knew the vague route that bus took, and I knew that it took me to our next village. But I couldn't remember whereabouts it went, but because it was dark outside, I couldn't actually tell where we were up to. When I started to recognise certain points through the rain and the dark, I started to recognise I was getting closer to home. As my stop was approaching, I noticed that the person at the back of the bus had moved forward and noticed that they were sat quite close to me right now. By the time that the bus hissed to a stop, they were right behind me on the seats. right behind me. I got off the bus. And the bus pulled away, leaving me standing by the bus stop on my own in the dark. It was still raining. It wasn't raining as heavy, but it's still really, really dim and dark. Thought I was on my own. As I glanced over my shoulder, I saw the person who'd been sat on the bus behind me. He stood just a couple of steps away from me. I turned towards the direction I was going in and started to walk quite fast. I looked behind me and the person was gone. Couldn't tell where they'd gone to then. I couldn't see any road to turn off. I couldn't see which direction they'd gone in. I quickened my steps along the lane in the direction of home. I looked back again. The person was nowhere to be seen. I was on the edge of that village now. And the street lights gave way to like a really, really dark lane. All the country lanes round by there were very dark, very narrow. And I started to walk quite quickly. The rain had stopped and everything seemed really, really still. My home was still maybe 5 to 10 minutes walk away still. There was a noise in the hedge next to me. Stopped me in my tracks. I looked round. I couldn't see anything. It was dark. I could see that the hedge was there. I couldn't see in the hedge. Nothing moved at first. And then a fox darted out of the hedge, across the road and in the direction of the field. I was tired. I was cold. I was walking quite quick. Then my feet started to go quicker. I was going to a near jog. The lane was so silent. All I could hear was my feet on the floor, my heart in my chest, and my breathing. Every now and again, I could hear an owl. That's all I could hear. Breathing as I was running. I finally reached my door. It was cold. I was trembling. My hands were cold as I was trying to find my key. Fumbled to find my key and to get my key to the lock. I dropped my key. It was pitch black dark. I couldn't use the torch on my phone. I was fumbling around in the wet leaves trying to find my key. I found my key. I opened my door. My house was silent. My house was dark. Went inside the door and shut the door. Leant against the wall. Hey, I wonder how you would have felt in that situation. I wonder whether you would have felt any element of, I don't know, panic, worry, stress. I wonder whether you could pop perhaps in the chat some of what you might have felt and when you would have felt that within that scenario. I can't actually see the chat right now. Oh, yes, I can. So if you could put some things in that chat, how you might have felt, when you might have felt it. So when you left work and you were running late and you perhaps had missed your bus, how would that make you feel? Frustrated? Angry? Stressed because you wanted to get home and have your tea? I wonder whether you would have, when you got to the bus stop, would you have felt worried? Would you have felt alone? When you got on the bus and you were the only one there, or thought you were the only one there. What about that?
Hi, Lisa.
Oh,
Sorry,
yeah.
if everybody could pop it in the Q&A box, that would be great. The normal chat box is disabled.
Oh, I'm so sorry. I was wondering why there was nothing in that box coming through.
Can you see the Q&A box, Lisa, or would you like me to read some of them to you?
Would you read them out for me, please, Jodie?
Yeah, of course I can. 2 seconds. So we've had one chat saying stressed, annoyed, frustrated, angry, and scared. Somebody has put terrified, stress leaving work late, frustrated, fear, scared, overwhelmed, terrified, anxious, pressured, isolated, anxiety, overwhelming anxiety, worried. We've had a lot. We've had a lot of messages in the chat box.
Right, so the themes there were worry, anxiety, frustration. They're going in your stress backpack, aren't they? We would have all felt different things at different times throughout that. Some of us would have gone, oh yeah, it's an inconvenience, but do you know what? That's life. And some of us wouldn't have been emotionally impacted at all. Lots of us would have been emotionally impacted. Think of that fear. Think of that isolation. A lot of us would have been cognitively impacted. Oh, this has really inconvenienced me. I needed to get home. I needed to phone such a one. So cognitively, that would have inconvenienced us. Some of us would have felt physical things. Okay, stress and anxiety can do things to our bodies, can't they? We might have felt our heart race. So our adrenaline and cortisol might have really, really rised up there. We might feel tense our shoulders, our teeth, our hands. We might have felt, physical pain, physical discomfort. We might have felt psychologically unsafe. We might have felt physically unsafe. Some of our children coming into schools might have, like I said, depending on what's in their stress backpack, they might be carrying some of these feelings. And as the day goes on, they might carry more and more of these feelings, picking them up. So we might see things like anxiety, overwhelm, masking, fatigue, trauma, rejection sensitivity, embarrassment, sensory issues, and thought of what other people expect of us. So although seemingly there mightn't have been anything to prompt such a big response from that child, think about all that what, there might be lots of other things going on for that. We mightn't have seen the stress that morning. We mightn't have seen that actually they were tired from last night. We mightn't have seen actually trying to get to school this morning was a huge hassle for them. We mightn't have seen that they're being bullied. We mightn't have seen that they're being neglected. We mightn't have seen that they're afraid of school. We mightn't have seen that they have neurodevelopmental conditions. Why did you explode over nothing? What was that all about? Why did you kick off? What do we do about that? Building a positive relationship and trust is absolutely essential. So building trusting, supportive relationships with our neurodivergent students is crucial. When we feel understood, when we feel respected, and when we feel valued, is when we behave in a calm, rational way. When we're open to suggestions, when we're open to what's happening around us. So by building those positive relationship and trusting relationships, what we're doing is helping them carry that stress backpack, aren't we? So we might, get to know their strengths and interests. So in things that we're asking the children to do within our classrooms, within the school environment, we might be able to show flexibility to bring in some of those strengths and some of those interests. When we're looking at how we manage behaviour, what does behaviour actually mean in this context for this child at this time? Can we allow them to talk? Can we allow them to move? Can we allow them to leave the room? So by building that positive relationship, they trust us. They trust us to help them, to help carry that backpack and look at some of those issues that are impacting them. So it's important for any positive positive reinforcement to be personalised to the individual. Praise is a really good way of using that positive reinforcement. Praise can be verbal. It can be something as simple as, hey, high five. It could be a special dance that we have, a special little rhyme that we have, whatever works for you and your students. Token systems can work really well for some children, whether they're stars or tokens or points, whether they're physical, whether they're arbitrary, whether it's on an app. But again, that must be individualized. Does that student perhaps respond to tokens? What about tangible rewards? What can that look like? A tangible reward might mean extra time on the iPad. It might be that they can choose the tasks. It might be that they can choose to play with a certain toy or a game at the end of the day. All of these work to reinforce that relationship, build self-confidence, build self-esteem, which will help deal with anything else that they've got going on in their lives. Recognizing small successes can reinforce positive behaviors. So when we're seeing things that, are positive about the child and positive about their way they're interacting with their peers or the class or the lesson, it's really important for us to recognize them. Often we only bring attention to the things we don't want to see, don't we? Hands to ourselves, kind words, please, all those types of things that we say to discourage the negatives that we might want to see. What about recognizing and drawing attention to those positives? Well done. That was great. I liked the way you said that. All of these, recognizing those small successes, reinforce that positivity, reinforce what we want to see in the classroom. Do's always work better than don'ts. So, just being mindful of how we word our instructions and how we word, any warnings to the class. Clear and structured routines and boundaries are really helpful. When things are predictable, that lowers anxiety, doesn't it? We know what's going to happen, we know when it's going to happen, and we can perhaps manage that transition between what we're doing now and what we're doing next. So those clear and structured routines with, regular revisits to absolutely embed that for our children and young people. Our visual work and memory is often better than our inner narrative, our perhaps verbal work and memory. So routines should be visually represented. That might look different from classroom to classroom, from child to child. That routine might be on the wall, broken down by day, by hour. It might be on our school app. It might be in our school workbooks. For the individual children, we might hone that down again to have those routines. We might have things lined up on the table that help that child remember the order in which things are going to happen. Again, it's helping to anticipate those transitions, to provide an element of predictability, and to provide an element of control for the child in perhaps an environment where they feel that they have little control or autonomy. Our social and emotional learning must be tailored to the individual's needs as well. So looking about the programs that we have in place and how they can be adapted to help develop those skills around our emotional regulation, around perhaps understanding the social cues and the social nuances of the classroom and the wider school. How do we improve peer interactions? So modelling how conversations and how peer interactions might look can be really helpful. Playing games that involve perhaps turn taking to strengthen those types of skills can be really helpful. So role playing, social stories, visual aids, these can all support the development of those skills. Role playing can be really good. It doesn't have to be in a drama scenario. We might use a program that we've watched together as a class. We might use the characters in a film that we're familiar with to look at those interactions and what would this person be thinking in those interactions. When our children perhaps feel they have a sense of control, they're going to feel more relaxed. They're going to feel more confident. Their esteem will be higher. They're more likely to be able to engage in the classroom. They're more likely to be able to manage transition and manage change. So helping them have perhaps a toolbox of strategies when they're feeling dysregulated can be really, really helpful to bring an element of control for the individual. So they're able to use their autonomy and use their agency to do something for themselves when they're feeling in a sticky position. Obviously, at first, that will involve co-regulation for us to teach these skills, to prompt these skills. But the more that we practice these skills, the more they're going to be embedded in the individual. So they will have that toolbox that they can call on whenever they need it, whether that's in a school situation, whether that's in a home situation or anywhere external. By practicing these skills, they're helping make their backpack lighter, aren't they? So those skills might be breathing. So it might be teaching our children how to regulate their breathing. When we're able to regulate our breathing to slow, rhythmic, diaphragmatic breathing, we're able to lower some of those stress hormones, the cortisol and adrenaline that are building up those anxiety and stress type feelings. A simple way, we might perhaps put one hand on our chest and one hand on our tummy and do some deep breathing. We'll notice that our hand on our tummy is moving the most. That means we're in diaphragmatic breathing there. So encouraging that nice in, out, that sort of rhythm in, out. Children quite often like to have a visual to support. We don't always have pictures or videos or things like that to help us. So to give a visual for breathing, we might use techniques such as we find, a shape. It might be the door, it might be the window, it might be the screen on their phone. We might breathe in through our nose on the short edge, breathe out through our mouth on the long edge. In through our nose, out through our mouth. By teaching these skills and giving a visual that the child can perhaps focus on, we're embedding those skills. We're giving them something to put in their toolbox that they can use in any situation at all. Breathing around our hand, up as we go up our finger, out as we go down. Mindfulness is another really, really good tool to use. It brings us into the here and now. It doesn't have to be anything huge. It doesn't have to be anything fancy. When we think about mindfulness, we often think about visual imagery to take us to that calm, safe place. You know, that might be on the beach or on the top of a mountain. We can do that. We don't have to. We can do some really, really, in the moment mindfulness. That might be just to think about how our bums feel on our chair right now. It might be looking at what's around us right now. You know, what colour are our walls? How many people are in the room? How many steps would it take me to cross the room? Noticing the trees. All of these things are mindfulness activities and will bring us into the here and now. Tactile tools can help us regulate our movement, our emotions, our cognitive ability, our focus, our concentration. You might hear tactile tools said as fidget toys. I really don't like the term fidget toys because the term sort of suggests an element of play and leisure, where in actual fact, tactile tools, which some people might call fidget toys, the purpose is to regulate. Okay, it's not a toy, it's a tool, it's a necessity. They may be those tangles, it might be a pen, something that we can move with. So that's what tactile tools give us. They give us that sensory input, but they also give us that subtle movement, because we can't always use big movements. Depending on where we are, they might not be appropriate. So smaller tactile tools also gives us that movement break. Movement is amazing. Movement lowers cortisol and helps lower stress. Movement can also prompt focus and prompt concentration. So that can regulate our cognitive abilities as well as our emotions. Movement might mean let's go outside and run around the playground. It might mean let's take these books over to that other desk. There's lots of things that we can incorporate in movement. It could be a game. It could be as simple as allowing a standing desk. Think about the movement that we can do while we're on a standing desk. We can shift our weight. We can move our feet. So giving that element of movement really, really helps. Grounding techniques. My favorite grounding technique is, the grounding technique that uses 5 of our sensory elements. So if we were feeling anxious or dysregulated in any way, if we could look around and name 5 things that we can see right now. Might think of 4 things that we could possibly reach out and touch right now. Think about what they would feel like. Would they be hot? Would they be cold? Would they be rough? Would they be smooth? Think about 3 things that we could possibly hear right now. What are those noises? Is it the lights? Is it the aircon? Is it the traffic? Think about 2 things that we can smell right now. Can we smell the books? Can we smell our lunch? Can we smell the cup of coffee on the desk? 1 thing that we can taste right now. What can we taste? Can we taste the toothpaste that we've just brushed our teeth with? Can we taste our lunch that we've just eaten? Can we taste anything? Is there nothing in our mouth? At a very easy grounding technique to do. And we can do it anywhere, whether we're in school, whether we're in the car park, in the queue in Sainsbury's. But it empowers us. All of these self-regulation strategies are strategies that we can do on our own to help ourselves. It is empowering. Sensory regulation can help in the same way as like the grounding, the mindfulness. So that sensory regulation might be weighted items. It might be perhaps feeling something cold, taking a sip of a cold glass of water. Anything that involves us thinking about our senses can be really, really helpful. As I said before, movement's great. We can put movement in lots of different ways. We can put big movement in, so we can have activities where we move. We can have dance, we can have outdoor play, we can have climbing. But like I said, those big activities aren't always appropriate in all settings. What else can we do? We might have flexible seating options that might involve a chair that moves or a wiggle stool. It might be that we have a standing desk. We've got some standing desks in the picture there. We might have movement breaks. So we might say, okay, every half hour, we're going to take a walk around the room and come and sit back down. It might be that every so often we have a stretch. We stretch our arms, we stretch our fingers, we stretch our faces. We might use experiential learning for our movement break. So lots of hands-on tasks, whether they're building blocks, whether they're number sheets, whether they're beads, whether it's different textures, whether we're moving into groups. So that experiential learning helps prompt movement into everything we're doing. Opportunities to release energy. Okay, so movement increases our focus. It increases our concentration because we use the same part of our brain to move as we do when we learn. But movement also gives us an outlet to release energy. Movement helps increase dopamine, which increases our focus and concentration. So we've got that positive circle there, haven't we? That movement in any form at all will help. So please allow movement, allow choice. It's important, I'm conscious that I'm overrunning slightly. It's important that we give choice to our children so they feel that level of autonomy, that level of control. When we're offering choice, be mindful that it should be only a couple of choice, otherwise we will overwhelm our children, young people, our learners. So the choice might be in what activity we're doing. The choice might be in how we do that. In which order do we do maths first? Do we do art first? Do we do history first? When we're given choice, like I said, only give a couple, 3 at the very most. Otherwise, we're going to overwhelm our children and young people. Clear communication is really important. So we use clear, simple instructions, avoiding abstract language, and using lots of visuals to help reinforce. So those visuals might be gestures, it might be written instructions, it might be pictures, anything that can accompany those verbal communications to embed that communication. Visuals are great. They reinforce the rules and the boundaries, help us feel safe. We know that there's something there is predictable. Visuals are transferable. They help with our work and memory. They're non-judgmental, help with those transitions and promote independence. When we're communicating, it's important that we're asking open questions, neutral questions. Questions to understand the situation. Avoid why. Why did you do that? Why did you think that was a good idea? That sort of implies blame, doesn't it? So, we're using our open questions to understand. So what is a good question? How is a good question? But perhaps limit the whys. Using positive phrasing. So, using "I will be over to help you as soon as you return to your seat" will work better than "if you don't return to your seat, I can't help you." Do's work better than don't. Give praise that's specific, and give frequent positive attention. You know, the Sprick, Broadmeyer and Nolet 2002, the research there shows that this is really effective. Lastly, be mindful of what you're carrying in your own backpack. What are you taking into the school? What are you taking into that lesson? What are your interactions like? So consider how we're presenting ourselves. Maybe when we're asked something or when we see something unfolding, take a moment to practice our breathing before we respond. Using our emotional labeling, actively listening. Like I said, we carry a lot of our own backpack. It's important that we don't take things personally within our class. We're the outlet. I hope you've enjoyed listening to the presentation this morning. Apologies that I have gone 5 minutes over. I'm open to questions if there's any questions in the questions box.
Oh, that was brilliant, Lisa. Thank you. We've had a few questions submitted. Our first question is, have you any advice for working with a neurodivergent child who is unable to mask, even with a trusted adult that they have a long-term relationship with in school? They cannot reveal their true thoughts and feelings, and it can create trauma and reinforces barriers, which, despite all adjustments and loads of support, means she survives the day and lets it all out at home.
That's not a single case, I'm afraid. We see this all the time, and it can be really distressing for the individual and for those around even. So if we're trying to encourage our children, young people to unmask, yes, you're absolutely right. The first thing is to build that trust up, have that trusted person, that trusted one person that they can go to if it's possible, you know, two at the very most, who we can have as that designated person. We might want to try, rather than asking about them, asking about a hypothetical person. We might make up a character, depending on the age. Beg your pardon, I can't remember whether you said the age there. It might be a toy, it might be a character in film, it might be a hypothetical, you know, we might say things like, a student I had a while ago, a couple of years ago even, and make up that hypothetical situation. It might mean that the child can explore what's happening for them, but in a safe way, because it's not about them. When we're having these types of conversations, those side-by-side conversations are often better rather than the face-to-face ones, because face-to-face conversations often prompt that anxiety even more. We're often more open to talking about ourselves, our inner selves, when they're side by side, we're not looking directly at the person. So perhaps try some of those strategies, side by side, speaking about a hypothetical person or a hypothetical situation, and asking the child, well, what do you think might be happening for them? You know, making it about somebody else rather than themselves. I hope that's helpful.
That's great, Lisa. Thank you. Our next question is, motivators/reinforcers can be tricky for kids with ADHD. Anything that's not immediate tends not to work. Any advice here would be appreciated. Thank you.
Okay, so you're absolutely right. ADHD brains work on that reward, and it's that instant reward rather than that longer term goal. So what can we put in for those instant rewards? Like I said before, those high fives, those instant praises, those instant elements can give that dopamine hit that actually that longer term reward would do. So having lots of opportunity to put in anything that would promote an influx of dopamine for that particular child. Thinking about, like we said, movement, prompts dopamine production. Novelty prompts dopamine production. So rather than the reward, maybe we just add elements of novelty, of challenge. When we're doing something we enjoy, that intrigues us or interests us or positively challenges us, we make more dopamine. And for those with ADHD, they're already making less dopamine than their peers. And then the dopamine that they are making isn't traveling across those synapses as readily. So putting any element of, novelty or excitement or challenge will act as that reward. So those longer term rewards, if we can build them into something more tangible in the moment, it doesn't have to be, a prize. It doesn't have to be extra time. It doesn't have to be that type of reward. It could be something as simple, yay, let's all just have a movement, let's all celebrate that in the moment. There's a round of applause. All of those types of things can prompt that dopamine. I hope that's helpful.
That's great, thank you. We have time for one more question. And our question is, hi, I work in a mainstream primary school with 3 neurodivergent children in my class. One of the pupils continues to have explosive reactions towards their peers when they are overwhelmed. I feel that we have tried everything. Do you have any advice?
I suppose my first protocol, you may well have already done it, because I know, obviously our schools have got a wealth of strategies and resources that are all wonderful. If that was in my classroom, my first protocol would be to speak with parents and carers, see what's happening at home, see what their interactions are like with friends outside of the school environment, with their parents, with their siblings, with their pets. So I'd be looking around at that to see whether that's given me any clues. If they're being harassed by an elder sibling, they might be transferring that onto their peers. So think about what that transference might be from other elements of the classroom. Once we've perhaps had those conversations, we might start working, in smaller groups rather than big classrooms. Is it just that they're overwhelmed by the size of the classroom, by how many other children are in that room? Is that why there's those explosive responses to other people? Try and pin that down. Is it that response to everybody? Is it certain people? Is it certain times of the day? Is it during certain activities? So really, really trying to hone in on what's going on for that young person at that particular time. Without knowing more detail about the situation, I'm afraid I can't give any more suggestions. However, as that starting point, I'd first of all look at transference, what's going on elsewhere, and then look at the environmental factors. If it's just in the classroom, if it's just in this particular 4 walls, is it with this particular group of people? Is it in this particular lesson? Narrowing it all down. I hope that's helpful.